What is up? And welcome in to another live edition of Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. I'm your host. I was spent today out at Saints minicamp, day 1 of 3. This is the mandatory minicamp, so we're going to get into that. Everyone was in attendance, so we don't need to go through a ton of that, but we'll break down who wasn't on the field and why. We're going to get into that and a lot more in this first segment. We're going to go through takeaways. In the second segment, I'm going to play an exclusive interview that I was able to get today with Saints wide receivers coach Cody Burns. And then in the final segment, we're going to get into a mailbag. So if you have any questions, comments, whatever, throw it in the chat and we'll get to them in the final segment, as many questions as we can. So let's go. First things first, I mentioned the attendance. This is always the first step of, okay, is someone holding out? The answer for the Saints, no, nobody is holding out. You're just going to go with what you have. From what Dennis Allen said, there was 100% attendance. I do apologize if my internet is giving problems. It was working fine, and now I'm seeing one bar. So if I'm cutting in and out, I do apologize. Hopefully it picks back up. I don't know why it's decided to freak out on me while I started, but all right, let's get back into it. There was 100% attendance according to Dennis Allen. Now, there were 3 players who were not on the field for practice. One is wide receiver Rashid Shaheed, who also missed the last set of OTAs. Another is guard Cesar Ruiz, who is still recovering from a Lisfranc injury. That's just been the case all throughout OTAs, but we have seen him on the field. So this is a slight change. And then defensive back Anthony Johnson, we don't really know what's going on with him. Now, Rashid was there. Saw him in the locker room. He said his injury is no big deal. I chatted with his agent, says no big deal. They're just playing it safe, but he's dealing with a groin injury. It has kept him off the field. Again, this is the time of year where you're just not risking anything. It does not make sense. After these 3 days of practice, you're going to get about a month and a half off. So if you're dealing with anything that you could potentially aggravate further, you're just not going to mess with it. And I think that's what's going on with Rashid Shaheed right now. These other guys, who knows? I mean, Cesar Ruiz was there at the facility. He has been there. I'm not worried about that whatsoever. Then you had guys like Trevor Penning, Eno Benjamin, Kendra Miller, Michael Thomas, Miller Forrestal, all in attendance. Nick Saldiveri was also there. They did not work out, but they were there. Cam Jordan, Marshon, Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, all these guys were there. Got a limited amount of work. Cam, we saw in the indoor session, did not do any team drills outside. I don't think it's injury related. I just think this is the time of year where you're getting some guys some rest if they have been there for 3 weeks, right? Now you have some of these other guys working in. They could use some reps. So I think you're just scaling back some of the work on the veterans. Now, let's kind of go down the line. There was 2 tryout players in attendance today, and they got a lot of work because Rashid was not there. And that was a pair of wide receivers in Kiki Kuti and Lynn Bowden Jr. These were guys who were almost exclusively working on kick return, punt return, that sort of thing. And I think if they have a chance to make this roster, it is in that kind of mold of the Saints need a backup kicker. So who is it going to be? I'm sorry, the Saints need a backup kick returner. So who is it going to be? Last year it was Marquez Callaway. Who is it now? It could be Kiki Kuti, which is a fun name to say. He was wearing number 16. We'll be able to watch him the next 2 days. He was also working in the wide receiver drills, but I don't think that's how he's going to make the roster. I think if you're even considering bringing him in, it's as a kick returner. Now, as you can see in the clips playing to my right, Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill were both in attendance. Alvin Kamara looks every bit like Alvin Kamara. We'll get into more on that in a second. Taysom Hill was a quarterback today, which is interesting. He's not wearing a red jersey, but he is taking quarterback reps. Jake Haener did not take a single rep in team drills today. This was a Taysom Hill quarterback day. And I think that's what we're going to see throughout training camp is occasionally you will get a Taysom Hill lining up at quarterback today because you do need to keep him sharp if you are going to have him go out there at points in games and throw a pass, right? We saw it happen. I want to say it was against the Seahawks last year, the game he went nuts. He just had that touchdown down up the seam to Adam Troutman that no one saw coming. And, you need him to at least be throwing passes occasionally and keeping his arm loose so that when you do ask him to throw a pass in a game, it's not the first pass he's thrown in weeks. So I did think that was interesting. His first day at practice was a Taysom Hill quarterback day. And so we asked Dennis Allen about that at the end of practice. And here is what he had to say about Taysom Hill's role, which is, kind of the same as what we've heard the last couple of years.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's kind of been his role since he's been here. And we're going to utilize him in a lot of different roles. He's a weapon offensively for us that can do a lot of different things. And so, our thought is to get him involved in a lot of different areas. Yeah, he's going to be getting quarterback work. He's going to be getting tight end work. He'll be a move guy for us. We'll have some of our quarterback run stuff that we do with him. We'll work with him in the passing game, and so he'll fill a lot of different roles.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not a surprise. We'd asked him earlier at OTAs whether he would maybe change rooms, whether he would be adjusted in some way based on how he was used last year, which was very much not as a tight end. But it does sound like you're going to just continue to see him work around. And I think it's interesting. I don't think throughout training camp last year, we saw him take a single snap as a passing quarterback. We saw him occasionally line up and take some interesting reps as a runner, but we didn't see him working as a quarterback. It didn't really happen until week 4, if you recall, when Jameis was dealing with the injury and it became clear that he wasn't going to be able to play. And so they had Taysom Hill doing some activations at quarterback in case they needed to use him. He was going to be the third string quarterback. Now, I do think it's interesting. Louise Lockett, big fan of the program, always saying something about Taysom Hill. And it was pointed out that, maybe this emergency third quarterback is a negative for Taysom Hill in terms of he's never going to get on the field as a quarterback. And I actually disagree with that. I think it opens a door for him in terms of if you did want to have him as that emergency third quarterback, you wouldn't be able to get him on the field because if you bring in that emergency third quarterback, which is a new rule this year, you cannot go back to either of your first 2 quarterbacks that were in the game. So in essence, if you decided to make Taysom Hill that emergency quarterback, he couldn't actually take a snap at quarterback without saying you couldn't bring the other 2 back in. Now, Jake Haener is going to be that. But that essentially means if you get down to it, I imagine Taysom Hill would still be the guy you put in the game instead of the emergency third string quarterback, which is kind of an interesting little subplot. Either way, you're going to see Taysom Hill throwing passes in this offense. I think if there was any question about whether that would be his role, you saw it answered today. Literally his first practice of the offseason, he was a quarterback in practice. Now, they are allowing him to get hit. That is the interesting thing. They're not giving him a red jersey. So he has to be careful. And we saw this last year, and I pointed this out in the preseason. Then it ended up being a negatively forecast thing that happened is he's got to be careful. He's not wearing a red non-contact jersey anymore, so he can get hit. And last year he had a pretty nasty rib injury in training camp. He re-aggravated it in week 2, and he's got to be careful. He's a guy who just plays with reckless abandon, and I think he had gotten used to not getting hit in practice. And then last year he took a hit and he missed time. So hopefully he can avoid that this year. Now, we also talked to Derek Carr and asked him about Taysom Hill, and this is what he had to say on his new kind of quarterback teammate, which is a new thing for him. That's going to be something we have to watch is how do those guys interact? Because Derek Carr is not a guy who's particularly used to coming off the field. He did it a little bit with Marcus Mariota with the Raiders, but not anywhere near as significantly than compared to what you are going to be expecting him to do with Taysom Hill, maybe coming off the field for 6, 8, even 10 snaps a game, which is unheard of for a starting quarterback in the NFL. And this is what Derek Carr had to say on Taysom Hill, if I can find it. There
you throw him a pass and he throws it back just as good. It's pretty interesting. He's got a cannon arm. He can run routes. He's tough. All those things, and you see why he's been such a productive football player.
Yeah, and I posted that quote or that clip on Twitter, and someone replied, "What he did? He just say he has a cannon arm?" And I mean, you could complain about a lot of things when it comes to Taysom Hill in terms of being a quarterback. I don't think he has the touch that you need in a lot of instances, but the guy has a fastball, no question. I don't know if he has a changeup, but he definitely has a fastball. So I do think that's funny that someone questioned that. Even if you don't like Taysom Hill as a quarterback, he 100% can rifle a ball in. All right. Now, moving forward to Alvin, this is the first time we saw Alvin Kamara out there. He looks good. He looks like Alvin, and he definitely impressed Derek Carr in terms of the way he can move around. And I tweeted this from our Inside Black and Gold Twitter account at Saints_pod. And you watch him in drills, and you would swear he's moving in fast motion, like you've sped it up. But that's just how he can move. And this is what Derek Carr had to say when he was asked about working with Alvin Kamara for the first time.
Alvin have been talking, about certain things, and what a great guy. I just absolutely love him. Great teammate, great energy about him, and very explosive. He's so smooth on film. You really just don't know how good he is. Obviously you see the film, but then when you get in person, he ran a couple routes. I remember I looked at Jake today and I was like, bro, that's not normal, and you just feel his presence when he's on the field. We were able to hit him on a couple little routes and things like that and see him move. And, I think just being around him just for a little bit, in the building, people don't really know how smart he is at football. What he knows where to say, he knows what route to run, he knows where to get, he knows how to use his help. And, that combined with his athletic ability, you see why now he's had all that production. And so, we've been talking, the whole time, but it was cool to see him in person for sure.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated to see how the Derek Carr offense utilizes Alvin in the passing game, because that's always the big question to me with how this offense is going to run. Is Alvin going to get 81 catches this year the way he did get exactly 81 catches in his first 3 seasons in the NFL, right? He still caught, I want to say 50 passes last year, but it sure didn't feel like that. And it didn't feel like he got them in high leverage situations in the way that you've seen in the past and that you'd like to see now. He wasn't used in screens. He wasn't used in kind of emergency checkdowns, which when you have Alvin Kamara on your offense, that checkdown, while it is the last resort, is a much more attractive option, right? I think there's going to be a point in this season where Derek Carr has to understand that you have the option to either squeeze a ball in and give a receiver a chance to go make a play on a dangerous ball, or you can check it down to Alvin, which always has the chance to break for a big play. And ignoring that is a mistake. And I think that's what happened too much of the time last year. I think 2 years ago with Jameis, it started out that way. And as things were developing, he started to use Alvin more. That Seahawks game where I think Alvin caught 10 passes in the first half. I think you were seeing him start to utilize Alvin the way he needed to. And then he kind of took a step back the following season. So that's where I want to see. And Derek Carr wouldn't commit to necessarily, force feeding Alvin the ball, but he does understand, this is a point. And if you're talking about a dangerous pass downfield versus checking it down to Alvin, the risk reward gets a lot closer just because of who Alvin is. But we're gonna keep moving forward. I will say that the offense had a rough day on the first day of minicamp. Both quarterbacks were solid in the set of 7-on-7s. Taysom Hill completed both of his passes. I think Derek Carr, after the first pass attempt of the day, which was a gorgeous pass breakup by Marshon Lattimore, who got beat to the outside and then just recovered, batted it away easily for the PBU, and then kind of just chilled and watched the rest of practice as like, yeah, you know me. After that, he completed his next, I want to say 5 passes. Jameis, I want to say, completed all 4 of his passes. But this was 7-on-7s. You get into 11-on-11s, and this was a 2-minute drill day, and it did not go very well. I don't have my notebook in front of me. I'd have to grab it. A lot of balls hit the ground. Let's put it that way. Traquan Smith dropped a couple passes. Foster Moreau dropped a pass. I think Derek Carr only completed 1 of his 4 pass attempts in that 2-minute drill, and then you had the turnover on downs. The final pass was actually a very nice ball up the seam to Traquan. I think in pads, he probably catches it. That's kind of the weird thing is you're not in pads. And so in order to catch it, he had to lay out completely. He got to the ball, but then he came down full force on the ball, which in pads, I think you probably hold on to it. When you're not wearing pads and you're just coming down, that's a tough thing to do, right? Imagine a center fielder trying to make a catch barehanded going into a dive. Like the glove helps. So I don't know. That's a play that might have worked out in the game. But either way, it goes down as a drop. Not a good day for Traquan. He kind of walked off gingerly. I think he kind of just got the wind knocked out of him, which you can understand coming down on a ball like that. Jameis Winston had 2 reps in team drills and in 2-minute drill. And the only reason it was only 2 reps is the first pass was a drop, just a straight drop from Foster Moreau, not on Jameis. The second one I would put on Jameis, although it was a nice play by cornerback Ugo Amadi, who undercut a pass to Jack Davis towards the edge of the field and came down with the interception. That kind of ended team drills. Again, as I pointed out, Jake Haener did not have a single rep in team drills today, which is kind of fascinating in terms of how you're going to incorporate him and Taysom Hill. I still think Jake Haener is a lock to make this roster. But I think it does tell you how much this team values Taysom Hill as a part of the passing game. One more thing I'll note, Paulson Adebo got the first team reps across from Marshon Lattimore today. And I think that gives you a good indicator of how this CB2 battle is going to start out. I think Paulson's going to have the inside track, and it's going to be on Alante to earn that job. That said, first team versus second team doesn't really matter right now. We could come out tomorrow and see Alante getting those first team reps. I think in a lot of instances they will alternate, but there's still something to be said about the pecking order that it started Paulson, and then you're going to see from there. Alante Taylor played on the outside in second team with Isaac Yiadom across from him. Bradley Roby got the first set of action in the slot, and I think that is who you are looking at this season to be your primary nickel slot corner, and I think you feel really good about it. But all right, let's wrap that segment up. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a bit more about the wide receivers, get into an exclusive interview with Cody Burns, and then talk a bit more about Ted Ginn. We saw Ted Ginn. There was a Ted Ginn sighting. Why? We'll get into that. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. If you aren't subscribed on YouTube, please do that. WWL Sports. If you aren't subscribed to the podcast version of this podcast, make sure to do that wherever you get your podcast. Just search Inside Black and Gold. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow my co-host on Twitter at Steve Geller WWL. He's somewhere in the state of Florida right now. I hope he's enjoying his vacation as I sit here and ramble, which is something that I do. Yeah, stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak, WWL digital sports producer and co-host of this here podcast. Steve Geller is in the state of Florida right now, so I'm coming at you solo. Spent today out at the Saints facility in Metairie watching practice, talking to players, talking to coaches. For the first day of mandatory minicamp, there was 100% attendance, so there will be no Saquon Barkley situation. We got to talk to people about Taysom Hill. That was fun. I think there were some interesting descriptions of Taysom, 2 from Derek Carr. One was that he was bigger than the stage he was standing on, and another that he was faster than his truck. And then we got another one from Jamal Williams, who described him as a big buff gazelle. And Jamal obviously knows Taysom pretty well, having played with him at BYU back in the day. But one of the position coaches that I was really interested in talking to at this practice, at this minicamp specifically, was Cody Burns, because I think he is I know he is in year 2 with the Saints. He's kind of coming into his own as an NFL coach, and he is leading to really intriguing players in Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, both of whom are coming into their own as second-year players. He's also trying to mold together this wide receiver room with a veteran like Michael Thomas, a lot of interesting and intriguing pieces around him. Traquan Smith, you have a rookie A.T. Perry, you have Brian Edwards. There's going to be a lot of interesting position battles up and down this roster at the wide receiver position. So I did want to chat with him. So I was able to catch up with Cody Burns at practice today for an exclusive interview. And here it is. A lot of the time when you talk about, the receivers coming back year one, year two, this is obviously your second year in this role. I'm just curious, for you coming into year two, is there anything you learned in year one that maybe you could apply this time around?
I'll tell you what, I think just the transition from college to NFL is, a lot of systems I've been in, no huddle. There's a lot of plays. You're running upwards of 100 plays a game. And so there's several opportunities. I think in the NFL, every single play and every possession matters. It's just not that many plays, just how you run the system of offense in the league. So, that's one thing I'll take away from it. And trying to trickle that down to my players is, you got a lot of first-year players going into the second year that came from college where, we had a lot of plays, but now just that understanding that it's almost like an NBA Finals. Like, every possession matters. And when your opportunity comes, you got to make the play.
Yeah, I think that's something we heard from actually Brian Kelly earlier this offseason, where he was talking about how, with the changes with the timing, it's like in college, a lot of times it's a volume thing, whereas in the pros, it ends up being more precision. Is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yeah. DA always likes to say in the passing game, I want precision, accuracy, and timing. Like precision, accuracy, and timing. And if we can get that, that's the key, is being on the same page with the quarterback, making plays when the number gets called, and being precise with everything you do. So the depth of the routes, the catch, the run after catch, just all the details and the intricacies that go with playing wide out really matter on every single play.
Gotcha. And, obviously, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, we didn't see Rashid, and he's dealing with a groin injury. But what have you seen from them coming into year two that they've maybe learned or are working on, and what do you want to see from them going forward?
Man, I'll tell you what, major growth by both of them. I think Rashid, for him, you kind of saw him towards the back end of the season. And right now you see a really confident player. And I think he's always been confident. But when I say confident, I think more so in the system and being more versatile than he was in year one, being able to move him around from multiple positions. So I've been really impressed with him just from his mental capacity and coming out here and playing. And he's had a really good camp so far. And then I've seen Olave grow too. I think in route detail, he's really grown. He's been really good and attentive in the meeting, and really just taking coaching from year one to year two, and all the things that I talked with him about working on in the offseason, I think he's really done a good job of doing. So it's been a pleasure so far to see both those guys.
I know last year one of the questions at the end of the season was how can you get more efficient uncontested catches? I know that's something that Chris and Rashid both need to work on. What are some of the things you can do to get better in that part of the game?
Well, I mean, we work contested catches, just about every single day.
Yeah.
And it just comes with repetitions. You got to be put in those spots. I mean, you can drill things a lot, but it's really just comes down to live reps. I mean, there's nothing like going live and there's a safety about to take your head off and there's somebody dragging you down. I got to go up and make a 50-50 ball. You can try to, give them different scenarios of that in practice, and we do some of those things, but it's more so just the confidence thing that, man, and you have this ability to go do it. We drafted in the first round for a reason, and we expect you to make those plays. And I think they've both grown at that. I think Olave's probably had a few more chances in those aspects than Rashid has. But I'm expecting some growth from him in year two, being able to make those plays.
And how has it been kind of them working with Mike Thomas, obviously just someone who's premier at that part of the game?
Well, it's always interesting because Mike's a different receiver than Chris Olave.
Yeah.
And Rashid, really. And really, to me, they're all three a little bit different. And Mike's game is not that of Olave's. Olave's not that of Mike, and same thing with Rashid. So it's good for them to be able to see some things from Mike, but Mike is a different player. He's a different prototype. He's a specimen. Chris and Rashid have speed. They got that redeeming quality of speed. So it's good for them to kind of see Mike and talk to him and and let Mike kind of school the young bucks up a little bit on, some of the things that he uses to get open, but those things may not apply to them. You know what I mean? So I've always taught my receivers, you got to know who you are, right? Like, everybody's different, and you got to obviously work to your strengths and also work on your weaknesses. And so just breaking those things down with Olave and Sheed, I think they've kind of done that this offseason. And like I said, I mean, it's just a matter of time. They got to go out there and do it in the game.
Gotcha. And one more question before you go. A.T. Perry, obviously 6th-round pick. What was some of the things that drew y'all in his direction, and what does he do that you think he can contribute this year?
Well, I mean, he's 6'4", 6'5". I mean, he got the intangibles. I think he ran a 4.47. Claims he jumped a 40-inch vertical. I think it was 34 or 35. We looked it up. But he's got all the intangibles and the skill set that you like to see. I think he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in the ACC, which is really good. He's quick, twitch as well for his size. Thought he had solid hands. There's just a lot of things that you really want to work with, and that's really what you're looking for in the back end of the draft is, like, what are some redeeming qualities that we can work with? And I think he has those. And he's shown flashes at times out here in OTAs that he can make plays and kind of be that guy. Just got to be more consistent. He's still a young player, got a lot of growing to do. He's got to get a little stronger and just, more opportunity to being in the system.
Gotcha. I appreciate the time, man.
Yep, appreciate it.
Sorry, I was muted there. So that was my interview with Cody Burns. I thought it was a really good interview in terms of, he said a lot of stuff that makes a lot of sense. One being that, we can talk all we want about Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, and Michael Thomas being this kind of dynamic wide receiver room, which I think it can be. But each player kind of individually needs to understand who they are and what they do well. They're three very different wide receivers, and they need to play to their own strengths and understand what those strengths are. A reminder, we're going to be doing a mailbag in the last segment of this program. So if you have any questions, comments that you want to get into there, make sure to drop them in the feed wherever you're watching, and we'll get into them. But I did think that he brought up a lot of interesting points. He talked about A.T. Perry. He did point out that he's a young player. He's still kind of gaining that consistency. But I think he did kind of indicate there that there has been some difficulties thus far. The hands have let him down. He points out that in the latter stages of the draft, and Mickey Loomis has said this pertaining to UDFAs, which once you get into the 6th and 7th round, you're effectively talking about, UDFAs that you picked, right? You're in the same range where you're just, instead of, negotiating with a guy to sign with you, you're just picking him because he has to come here. And you're looking for an elite trait. You're looking for something he does, a redeeming quality, I think is the way Cody Burns put it, to kind of get you through that. And his elite quality is his size and his ability to go up and make contested catches and make plays at a level that other players can't get to. So far, we haven't seen that. But again, we're talking about 10 practices total, 4 that we have from the media seen. He did say that there have been flashes who we don't know if he maybe looked a little better in the OTA practices that were closed to the media. I'm guessing that he probably did. I think there is a level of kind of psyching himself out going on, and he'll settle in. He's still got a lot of time ahead of him. But I think you're just going to look at this wide receiver room and kind of say, okay, how can it improve from a year ago? We talked to Chris Olave in the locker room. We talked to Rashid Shaheed a few times, and both have claimed that they have bulked up a bit. I think improving in the contested catch part of the game is more of a factor for Olave than it is for Rashid, although he needs to be good in that realm as well. And, if they have bulked up, if they are going to fight a little stronger than they did last year, I think that'll be a good start. Now, there is another wild card in the equation, which is Ted Ginn was out there today. Obviously, a wide receiver that spent time with the Saints, went to a familiar haunt of Ohio State. So he has some common ground to navigate with Chris Olave and Mike Thomas, but I don't know exactly what he's doing right now. He's kind of in the wide receiver room working with the players. I don't think he's technically on the staff. This is what Dennis Allen said about Ted Ginn being in the room. If I can ever find it.
Yeah, Ted's here with us in this mini camp. We'll see whether or not he comes back in training camp to kind of help us out. But look, another veteran presence that's played for us, that kind of understands, how we do things, and I think he can be a benefit for us in the wide receiver room.
Yeah, and I think anytime you can bring someone back who has an idea, who can kind of lead guys to water in a way of putting it, it's helpful, and I think these guys respect Ted Ginn. Chris Olave, I'm sure, grew up watching Ted Ginn, right? Like, he's of that age where he remembers Ted Ginn as an NFL player. Ted Ginn's not that far removed from being on the Saints. He was on that 2018 squad. One of the best Ted Ginn highlights that never gets talked about because of what happened immediately after it is he went up and mossed a guy, I can't remember the defender, in the NFC Championship game to set up the Saints in the red zone. That was the play immediately. I don't know if it was the play immediately before, but that was what set up the Tommy Lee Lewis no call. The Saints would never even have been in that position if it wasn't for Ted Ginn. And if they go in and they score a touchdown there and make it to the Super Bowl, he is, revered as one of the greatest moments in Saints history. That's going to be on all the highlight reels. Bill Vinovich made sure no one talks about it ever. I don't even know if you search for it, you could find it, but I remember I tweeted about it at the time. So I'm going to try to go find it because it's one of the best plays I've seen a Saints receiver make in years in such a massive moment. And he was about to be the hero, and instead it's like a play that no one remembers. Anyway, I think Ted Ginn, people talk about his hands. He had actually a much better Saints career than a lot of people give him credit for. So hopefully he can influence these wide receivers in some ways that, are helpful. And, not for nothing, Ted Ginn was one of the greatest kick returners in NFL history. I guess, I take that back. Ted Ginn was one of the greatest kick returners in NCAA history. He went in the mid to high first round. I can't remember exactly where he was drafted, but he was a first round pick on the strength of his return game, of his ability in the return game. So, maybe there's some pearls that he can impart on a guy like Rashid Shaheed, on a guy like Malik Flowers, as the Saints kind of get into this. But all right, that's the end of that segment. Again, this is Inside Black and Gold. We're going to get into a mailbag to close out the show. If you have any questions, comments, make sure to throw them in there. We're talking about the first day of Saints minicamp practice, which was held today out at the Saints facility in Metairie. There was no lightning. I feel like it's one of the first times I can say that about anything. You've been watching LSU baseball over the past few weeks, which congrats to the Tigers getting to Omaha. Lightning delays are, I feel like I'm going to have a nervous twitch every time I hear the word a lightning delay. After driving all the way out to Baton Rouge, I'm just complaining now, drove all the way out to Baton Rouge with Steve Geller to watch the LSU Oregon State game on that Saturday. And instead, we sat there watching heat lightning out in the distance. And I know heat lightning technically doesn't exist, but it's you get it. It was lightning without any rain or anything. And then we ended up driving home. The game never happened. So, yes, the last two Saints practices have ended up inside. I'm just rambling now. We have two more practices to go this week. It's going to be fun to be able to get out there. And so I focused a lot on the wide receivers today. I focused a lot on, with Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara. I'm going to try to get more on the defense tomorrow. But again, questions, mailbag, throw them in the comments. We're going to get to them when we come back. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that and stick around. And we're back. One more segment on this here mandatory minicamp edition of Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold. My co-host, Steve Geller, is on a beach somewhere in Florida. Hope he's having a good time. I'm saving my vacation for after minicamp, like a good Saints reporter would do, but I'm just kidding. I hope he has a good time. We're going to be getting into the mailbag in this segment. There's only about 10 or so questions in there. There's a ton of comments, but I was only able to surface about 10 or so questions or comments that can be addressed. So if you have any, feel free to throw them in. There's plenty of time to get to them. The first thing I'll get to, and I have a few of these starred, is I do want to make it clear. Corey Marshall Felton here says, I thought Ginn was retired. And yes, this is a little confusing. He's kind of on the fringe of, wait, did they bring Ted Ginn back as a player? No. He is there as, I can't say as an assistant coach. Maybe he is interested in getting into coaching at some point in his career. I don't know. They brought in Jari Evans last year, and now Jari Evans is an assistant offensive line coach. At this point, I believe Ted Ginn is kind of just around. He's just in the wide receiver room, helping the coaching staff, kind of talking to the receivers. Maybe he could come on in some sort of assistant role down the road. Either way, he is not there to be a player, although he does look like he's still in excellent shape. I don't know. Maybe he could go out there and run some routes. Either way, to be clear, Ted Ginn is retired, and he is out back helping the Saints in a coaching adjacent role. Don Tomasino. Well, first, let's get to this. Bowden went to Kentucky, right? I do believe Lynn Bowden Jr. went to Kentucky, yes. And then he asked, what does everyone think of the receivers coach so far? We're talking about Cody Burns. He was at Tennessee before coming to the NFL to coach the Saints. And, I'll just answer this question. And if anyone else has any other answers, throw them in the comments. But I've been impressed with Cody Burns. He's a young guy. I think that transition from college to the NFL as an offensive position coach can be daunting. And, what we talked about in the interview to start off is, what adjustments he's made. What is he trying to get better at going into year two? Because I think that is something as a position coach, you do. You get better and you learn over time. And he brought up something that I actually have heard from Brian Kelly this offseason in regard to some of the timing changes that are going on in college football, where they're talking about not stopping a clock after every first down. And I don't think, they were considering, the clock running on incomplete passes and stuff like that. And coaches in college were all up in arms because it's going to limit the number of plays in every game. And Brian Kelly, who I respect greatly as a coaching mind, pointed out that all it's going to do is force college teams to be more proactive and be like NFL teams in valuing every play a lot more highly. And you go back to the Chip Kelly type offenses where it's all about volume. It's about run as many plays as possible. They don't have to be perfect. You're just trying to run them all, and eventually you'll get somewhere. In the NFL, you don't do that. In the NFL, every play has to be precise, and you have to get the maximum value out of it. And that was the first thing he brought up, and I think it's a very good point. When you were coming from the college level to the NFL level as a wide receivers coach, you have to throw out this idea that volume means success and start honing in on every individual point and making sure every route you run is precise. Every play that you're running, you know exactly where you need to be, because that one missed play can be the difference between a win or a loss, especially at the NFL level. So I did think that was interesting. I also think it's nice to see a younger coach in that wide receiver room. This is a very veteran coaching group, right? Clancy Barone, the new tight ends coach, is up there in age. Todd Grantham is up there in age. Dennis Allen, I think, is in his 50s, right? But Joe Woods, I think, is in his 50s. A lot of coaching experience. But I do think there's a point where you have to relate to the young guys. And I think he is able to do that. I like him a lot. He's very fun to talk to. If you didn't catch that interview, go back to the second segment of this podcast. I thought it was very, I don't want to say illuminating, but I think he did get to a lot of very good points. And I'm rooting for him. I hope he can kind of climb up the ladder, because I think he is a very good coaching mind. Louise Lockett points out she just rewatched the Minnesota Miracle game. Ginn Jr. was a star wideout. Yeah, and just anytime you watch that, just make sure to stop it with about 10 seconds left and celebrate as if they won, because that's what I'm sure some people did. And but no, like Ted Ginn, I think, gets overlooked during that really, really high quality kind of 2017 to 2018 range of he did a lot of really good things. I think he was there in 2019 as well, and he was catching passes from Teddy Bridgewater. I know he caught one on a little scissor route against the Bucks, and probably Teddy's best game as a backup. He had a solid Saints career, was never incredibly productive, but he wasn't here to be incredibly productive. He was here to be a warm body across from Michael Thomas, who was catching all the passes. And I think he did that about as well as you could hope. All right, let's keep it going. Ryan McGee, I think it's McGee, I don't know, asked if we saw Jamal and Taysom interacting. Jamal is interacting with everybody. It's tough to gauge exactly who he's dealing with at any particular point. But they are very much cool with each other. We talked to Jamal in the locker room about Taysom. I haven't had a chance to go through that audio yet, but I will. I'm going to put together a story because I thought there was a lot of interesting points made about Taysom Hill. And, everyone in that locker room loves Taysom Hill. I do think that's something that we've kind of seen this group is they are very together. There's no sniping. Jamal is a very unique character. He has a way about him that is, you're not going to find it in a lot of NFL players. I don't know if you can, to be honest. He might be one of one in that regard, but yeah, they are friends. So I'm sure they will have some interesting stories to tell about each other before all is said and done. We have Rose City. You heard M3 Traquan Smith season loading. I will say, I was very high on Traquan Smith after the last practice. I'm not saying I've changed that opinion, but he did struggle today. I think you see these highs and lows with Traquan, and that's where you get the frustration because his last OTAs practice, he caught 3 touchdowns in the red zone. In his first minicamp practice, I take that back. In the last OTAs practice that we got to watch, which was the first of the 3, he caught 3 touchdowns. In the first minicamp practice that we got to watch, he had 3 drops. So it's that up and down Traquan that we remember. I still think he does enough that you're going to end up bringing him back onto the roster. But, he did not stand out today the way he did at the last practice. Mr. Whodad All Day 504 says just need to be healthy overall. Man, I hope so. It would be so nice to not constantly be talking about, if only they didn't have half the offensive line on injured reserve, right? You changed up the medical staff. You changed up the training staff last year. It's not going to be a immediate fix when you change a lot of stuff. So hopefully that's just something that, maybe it's an aberration last year and you get back to the mean this year. But we've been saying that for years and years. Either way, yeah. I mean, a healthy season, especially in a year where you have, are debatably, empirically the weakest schedule in the NFL. You can look at all these metrics. The Saints have the easiest schedule in the NFL. And all you have to do is go out there and win the games you're supposed to win. And you're in the playoffs. You're in the postseason. I was looking at a PFF ranking the other day, and there are 4 teams. There are only 3 teams projected to have more wins in their PFF projections than the Saints. But the Saints are their 20th team in the power rankings. That's how winnable this season is for the Saints. And if they can't take advantage of that, that's going to be a problem. Got lame ASF. Not going to say what the acronym stands for. It says Pete Werner guarding the slot will pay off big. He could be a Fred Warner level pass coverage linebacker. I'm not sure where people are getting Pete Werner in the slot. Maybe from the 7-on-7s, you're kind of just moving all around. Pete Werner's not going to cover the slot. Pete Werner's the will linebacker, and he's gonna stick there. Pelicans Noah says if Mark Carmichael opens up the offense with Derek Carr, the Saints will be the most dangerous team in the league. I would like them to be a proficient offense before I'm going to claim they're going to be a prolific offense, right? I need this offense to be efficient and move the ball and score points. And yeah, maybe later in the year you can reach a level where you are blowing the doors off people. But I need to see this team look cohesive and not make mistakes. Because right now I think you're still seeing some of those growing pains. And that is something to get into Tedrick Covington says Jamal is a cool guy, going to love his interviews all year. Yeah, one thing Jamal does as a reporter that's kind of funny is anytime you get to a point where two reporters start talking at the same time, because that's kind of how interviews work, is it's kind of a game of chicken. Is like you start talking, and then if someone else kind of starts, you just keep going and pretend you don't see them, kind of like pulling out into traffic. But every time Jamal witnesses that, he has reporters play rock, paper, scissors, and he did that today. Yeah, he is very much a character. Louise Lockett says good content, but the comment section is brutal. Yeah, I'm having a hard time keeping up with it. There are a lot of comments in here, so I'm just kind of going through. All right, let me see. Kimberly W., thank you. This is first time listener, really enjoyed it, has hit the subscribe button. Very much appreciate that. All I do is ramble, so I'm glad that it's two people's liking. Louise Lockett says, I like Smith, but this is a business. Yeah, I don't see that. I think he's not making the roster. Right? Like, keep this in mind. Approaching it like a business is the reason Traquan Smith is going to make the roster, right? Like, I would love to see a Kirk Merritt on the roster. I would love to see some of these younger guys make the roster. But the things Traquan Smith does and the dirty work he does and that you can trust him to do is one of the reasons that he's going to beat out some of these more fun storylines. I don't think it's a guarantee this year. I think this is probably the thinnest ice Traquan has been on so far in his Saints career, because he's not guaranteed any money beyond this season. And, he's going to have to earn it. Right. But I still think he does stuff that some of these young guys are going to struggle to keep up with. All right. Not sure what this means. Says somebody do a mashup video of Sean and DA saying, look, from the past decade. Okay. So yeah, how they start every answer with look. Let's see. I do. So that is one of the things they do. The other one, both Sean did all the time and DA started doing, is relative to. Like, anytime they're talking and they need like about a half second to finish a thought in their mind so they can say it out loud, they will say relative to, and then kind of extend the to, and then just go into something else. And I did actually, I'm going to have to go find it. I did put together a kind of mashup of all the time Sean said relative to in one interview, and it was like 12. And it was just like relative to, relative to, relative to. Anyway, so yeah, that is one thing. If you watch enough coach interviews and player interviews, you'll start to see like the tics, the kind of internal vamping things that these guys say. And I have them too. I say like all the time. I have that kind of Valley Girl like, wherever I say like at least 100 times every podcast. And I listen back occasionally, and I'll listen and I'll hear it and be like, just did it. It's like, why do I keep saying that? It's a character flaw. It's a speaking flaw. I'm getting better at it though. Rose City, you got another one. You want to win? Give Traquan a spin. That's quite that sure rhymes. I'll give you that. He's talking about Pete Werner guarding the slot again. He may be the one who will occasionally have guard Kyle Pitts instead of Davis. See, Kyle Pitts is a weird example. Last year when the Saints played the Falcons, Marshon Lattimore shadowed Kyle Pitts. So I don't think Kyle Pitts is a guy you want to line up a linebacker against. Some of these bigger tight ends, yes. But a Kyle Pitts is basically a wide receiver. So if he's coming out of anywhere that is not the Y, which would be in line, I think you're going to have Marshon shadowing him around unless a guy like Drake London really emerges and is the guy you would shadow with Marshon. But as of that first matchup last year, which is the only one we saw Kyle Pitts in, Marshon shadowed him. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And I agree. I don't think Bradley Roby in the slot would be able to hold up against the size, but I don't think you're going to see Pete Werner going outside of his comfort zone to cover people. I could be wrong, but hey. Rose City said they both said well a lot. Blonix says, I feel like Foster Moreau will get that number 18 if Keith Kirkwood doesn't make the roster. It's possible. I'm not sure. Can tight ends wear 18? I know they loosened the jersey rules last year, but I'm still not sure if tight ends are allowed to go that low in the numbers game. Wide receivers can, obviously. But I'd have to double check because like I know linebackers can wear 20, and I think 20 might be the lowest they're allowed to wear. I think maybe tight ends are in the same boat with the linebackers, but we'll have to see. Tedrick Covington says Taylor will be moved to the slot. I think it's possible. I think they're going to want to have him cross-trained in the slot. But I think, and I've said this before, if you have him working at outside corner all offseason, I don't anticipate that suddenly he's going to be your starting slot corner. You might bring him in and he might be a rotational guy, but I don't think that's going to happen because I think they see him as a outside corner in the future. And so you're going to just want to kind of work him in there. If the Saints are fortunate enough to be healthy throughout the season to a point where you just want to get him on the field, sure. That will be a luxury. If you go back to last season, I don't know if there was ever a point where you were like, man, we're so healthy at quarterback. Let's just throw Alante in the slot and see what happens. But I do feel like Roby homing in on the slot, whatever you want to say, is the ideal scenario because I want whoever lines up in the slot for the Saints in week 1 to be owning that position. I don't want it to be okay, well, we just have too many cornerbacks. Let's see what he can do in there. I want, just like CJ owned the slot when he was here, I want Bradley Roby to own the slot, which means that you will have 3 cornerbacks between 2 outside spots, but you need 3 cornerbacks between 2 outside spots because throughout the course of a game, guys get dinged up, guys get hurt. You go back to the Minnesota game in 2019, the playoff game that ended with not Travis Rudolph. That's the wrong Rudolph. Travis Rudolph is, I think he actually got acquitted, but he was being tried for murder as of a week ago. Kyle Rudolph, who also got away with something in the Superdome. The play before that, Marshon Lattimore came off the field. Patrick Robinson had to come on, and suddenly he's guarding Adam Thielen, and he gets lost. And Adam Thielen catches I don't know how far it was. It was like a 40 to 50 yard pass down to the 1 yard line. That's what set up the touchdown, right? So you want to have that guy on the bench who you can throw in on a whim and trust, and if that's Alante Taylor, I think that's going to be the case. No, I don't disagree with this, but I think he would be the backup slot as well as the backup outside corner. I don't think you would have him suddenly starting at the slot after having Bradley Roby work in the slot all training camp. And this is all assuming that Alante Taylor doesn't win the outside cornerback spot outright, which I think is a realistic possibility. I just think you have to approach it from this guy's done all the work at that position, and so he is better at that position. This isn't a game of Madden, so you do have to trust the guys who have done the work for you. All right, let's see. I'll try to get one more. Blahnik says, I trust Roby a lot more in the slot than the likes of Chris Harris or Justin Evans last year. And yes, I agree with this. One of the things that drove me nuts last year was watching this kind of revolving door at the slot corner position because it's no longer a position that is only on the field 15, 20 snaps a game. You are running out of the nickel or dime 80 to 85 snaps, a percent of your snaps. That is almost a full-time player. That is you have the slot corner on the field significantly more than you have your Sam linebacker on the field. So you wouldn't look at that position. You should not look at that position as kind of a throwaway, okay, our third best outside corner is going to play that position. You need someone who's going to own that position. And the only reason it doesn't get approached like that is because it's still kind of viewed as this extra position that you're just going to play. Okay, yep, there you go. Good point. Evan Engram does wear 17. So yes, you are correct. So thank you for clearing that up for me. I will cut that whole tangent out of the podcast now because you are correct. Elite Goods LLC says, talking about some folks. Not sure what that means. I say folks a lot. All right, let's get one more. Not this one. Asks if I box. Say I don't box. All right, here's a good one. We'll close on this. Blahnik, who is a Tiger Woods avatar here. Speaking of defense, how much impact do you think Brzee will have on the interior pass rush? And this is an interesting question because I think first and foremost, on the interior, you need to stop the run. If you can't stop the run, there's no such thing as an interior pass rush. So that's my first question is, can he hold up against the run? Because if you can't, as a rookie, then you are going to be limited to obvious passing scenarios, right? You will be a pass rushing interior lineman, and that's going to significantly limit the amount of time you can be on the field. That said, I do think as a situational pass rushing lineman on the interior, he does have a lot of intriguing upside with the athleticism to go get a quarterback. So, I think it's an interesting question, but I think Colin Saunders is the guy that I need to see be able to hold up against the run. And then one of Nathan Shepard and Brian Brzee is going to be kind of that gets after the quarterback guy, right? It's going to take that David Onyemata role. I think he could be good. I'm interested to see what he looks like when the pads come on. One thing that you'll notice if you go out to training camp or you watch Brian Brzee, he's a high cut guy. That's what Mike Detillier calls him, and he's right. He's got really long legs for an interior lineman. If you go, if you put him next to Kentavious Street, they'd be about the same size, except Kentavious Street's hips are about 8 inches lower than Brian Brezee's, and that's going to be a challenge for him in the run game because you have to get low. You have to get, center of gravity wins in that case. And I think you're going to struggle to get him on the field in early downs early in his career, and he's going to end up being a rotational guy. All that said, the interior pass rush is what drove Tom Brady nuts. There's certain quarterbacks where you want to rush them up the middle. There's certain quarterbacks where you want to hem them in the pocket. Lamar Jackson, for example. I don't want to get an interior rush. I want to hem him in because the second he gets outside the pocket, you're screwed. Guys like Kyler Murray, guys like Jalen Hurts, Daniel Jones even. Like, that's something that you have to consider, and you have to kind of change your rush strategies. I think he's going to be good. I think he has a learning curve, which is the case whenever you pick in the end of the first round. You're not getting those day one starters all the time. I think he's going to be a rotational guy. That said, I think he can impact the rush, and I think he will. I'm glad you pointed to this from a rush perspective, because I think early in his career, you're going to want to see him getting after the quarterback, because that's how, when he's on the field, that's how he's going to contribute to winning. Man, we're doing weird stuff here. Planet Nibiru has made landfall. End game. Hashtag end game. Do I do Ray Romano impressions? I could. I have that nasally voice. I think you're talking about Ray Barone technically, because if you're talking about the character Ray Romano is a comedian. Ray Barone is the sports writer on Everybody Loves Raymond. So yeah, my mom was obsessed with that show, and so I know it well. But I don't. I probably could be an Everybody Loves Raymond impersonator, but for now I'll stick with my day job. But all right, y'all. This has been Inside Black and Gold. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. This is very well viewed. It's one of our more popular live streams in a while, so I appreciate that. A lot of comments, a lot of questions. Thanks everyone who watched, everyone who threw a question or a comment in the chat, even though there's been some nonsense going back and forth about planets and whatever. Got someone named Pull My Finger in here. But yeah, as always, thanks everybody. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. I will be out at the Saints camp, the Saints facility, each of the next 2 days, getting into minicamp. I will also be hosting Sports Talk on WWL Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On Wednesday, it'll be 6 to 8. Thursday and Friday will be the full show, 4 to 8. On Thursday, I'll be hosting with Bobby Hebert. On Friday, I will be solo with Charlie Long as the producer. So if you want to check that out, WWL AM 870, FM 1053, and the Odyssey app. You can also call in, give me a text. I always appreciate that, especially on Fridays, because I run out of things to talk about. So that's 504-260-1870. Literally just call in. We'll let you on, believe it or not, and we'll go from there. But as always, this has been a lot of fun. Make sure to subscribe, rate, leave a review, and otherwise, be easy, y'all. Peace.